Today's episode, we react to week 3 of the preseason. We take a look at some snap count information, targets per route run over the whole season. We also take a look at some injury suspensions and cuts that are already going around. Stick around for all of that and more. Welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. We're back in full force. Justin here with David and JP, bringing our reactions to week 3 of the preseason. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our new content. Want to throw out a caveat that one of the more important things we're going to be looking at today, not a lot of people played, so we're going to try to react to who got sat and what that might mean a little bit, as well as, of course, who played and what they did. Going to try to decompress and tell you what is news and what is noise. Go ahead and start us off with some of what happened this week, JP.
So we really just had one big news piece this week, and that is Zay Jones was suspended for 5 games for violating the league's personal conduct policy. But yeah, that's notable because he was a candidate to be in the three wide receiver sets. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's something that I wanted to point out before we get into the games, and I thought this was a really interesting tweet from Sam Sherman on X. The rookie wide receivers who earned targets at a high rate during the preseason, right? The highest guy was Jalen McMillan with 38% targets per route run, Jordan Whittington at 36%, Casey Washington 32, Xavier Worthy 32, Corley and Ryan Flournoy at 30%, and AD Mitchell was the next highest at a 26% targets per route run. So I just want to point that out because these guys, a lot of times they weren't playing with the starters. I'm pretty sure all of them weren't, except for maybe McMillan and Worthy. But they were doing well when they were on the field, so I think that's at least notable, something to remember.
Don't hate that. Some interesting names to keep an eye on. We'll talk about a few of them throughout the episode. First game we're going to touch on Bears versus Chief. No Chiefs or Bears starters, so no Caleb, no Dunze, no Xavier Worthy this week. Kind of disappointing, but we did get to see Velas Jones, superstar, 13 carries for 111 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Scott doing well, 6 for 99. Not really either of these guys that I am interested in any format other than best ball. Even then, not super interested. The Chiefs RB room, though, definitely one we're interested in keeping an eye on. Kind of tough to know what's going on as 5 different Chief RBs, not including Pacheco, got 3 or more carries. Deneric Prince had 3 carries for -1 yards, so I might be dropping a few shares of him over the next couple of days. Carson Steele, 4 for 50, 1 touchdown as the leader. He's been a hype train guy and like to see that going. Any comments on either of those for you guys?
I don't know if I'd cut any of the Chiefs running backs after cut down day. They're not really giving us a lot of information to go on. Someone's going to have to back up Pacheco, and that's probably going to be a pretty valuable backup. It doesn't look like Prince, but I mean, if you got a better option, sure. But if not, maybe just hold till Tuesday.
Are you going Deneric Prince or Malik Davis on the Cowboys? I'm making this choice in one league.
But probably stick with Prince, honestly. But I guess I haven't heard a lot of hype about Davis. I don't know. I think Prince has a shot still at the RB2 job, even if it's not the likely candidate. I also think Velas Jones is interesting. He's like 28 probably now, though, isn't he?
He was 25 as a rookie. Third rounder in the NFL draft at like 25, I think.
And now he's going to go into position change.
All right, moving on. What's our next game, David?
Yeah, I talked the Jags versus Falcons. Fortunately, we did not see any Falcons starters. We also did not see Michael Penix, which we talked about a little bit last week. Kind of interesting. Just kind of something weird to monitor there. Normally, you'd expect Penix to play in the situation he's in. Rookie wide receiver Casey Washington, just mentioned above, in targets per route run, led Atlanta in receiving with 31 yards. JP tweeted how he has a shot to be the wide receiver 3 for this team as the season goes on. Jace McClellan appears to be the RB3 behind Algier and Bijan. Now for the Jags, they did play some starters. Trevor went 8 of 12, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thomas led the team in receiving with only 1 catch, but it was a 38-yard reception. And then Evan Ingram just doing what Evan Ingram does, 4 for 28 and 2 tutties.
Except he's not doing what Evan Ingram did because last year, Ingram only had 4 touchdowns all year. If Ingram could score 8 touchdowns this year, tight end 1 is like actually within striking range with the amount of targets that he got last year. Like if he could get 8, 9 touchdowns, it's not impossible.
Yeah, he was sniffing tight end one numbers with that low touchdown total. Yeah, with the amount of volume that he gets, if he gets, a higher number of touchdowns, like you said, Justin, if he gets 8, yeah, I think he's probably a top 2 or 3 tight end this year.
I mean, he was pretty much a top 2 or 3 tight end last year.
Yeah, but I think it'll be stronger, more competitive this year with McBride playing all year, and I guess Hawkinson's out the way, but we expect maybe Pitts and Kincaid to break out as well.
Love Ingram, superstar. Next game, JP.
We got the Colts versus the Bengals. There was no Bengals starters, but we saw Jermaine Burton. He had 4 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. This marks a great preseason for Jermaine Burton. He's through the preseason has 8 catches for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has an 89% catch rate, which for a guy that works downfield a lot, is very impressive. And he had the highest passer rating when targeted amongst all rookie wide receivers. And before asking you guys about him real quick, I just want to touch on the Colts. Anthony Richardson, he was 8 for 14 with 86 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It continues to be a little bit up and down for him through the season, but AD Mitchell caught a touchdown, which is interesting. With Jermaine Burton, what do you guys think? Because he hasn't been playing with the starters. Andre Yoshivas, he has been ahead of Burton seemingly all of the offseason, but Burton's been really good. So I wanted to get your all's thoughts on him.
I mean, obviously, Burton has upside. Jovic doesn't really have upside, in my opinion, and I think that's not anything crazy, right? So the way I'm kind of approaching it is I'm hoping that Burton is not starting, isn't even playing basically for the first couple of weeks, and people get like real bummed, and that somebody else who's starting, doing just a little bit, but who I don't really believe in as a rookie, maybe someone I drafted in like the 4th round, give or take, I can flip them for Burton because I am very interested in seeing if I can get Burton for a late projected third if I have it to spend, or a player that's worth like a third that I don't believe in, something along that line. I think the guy's good at football. I think they're kind of making him earn it, but from everyone smart that I've listened to about football raving about him, what he did, his profile coming into the NFL, I think this is a possible like cheap buying window if he doesn't get any playing time, and I'm very excited about that possibility.
Yeah, I kind of think that window will be open most of the year with Chase and Higgins out there. I know Higgins might leave. Chase kind of might leave too. We really don't expect that, but until they lock him up, it's a possibility. So yeah, Burton's definitely interesting. I don't know that I would go out of my way to get him, but certainly if their manager sours on him, worth reaching out. I think Richardson definitely, if you just watch the good, it looks really good. But when you watch the bad, you're like, oh gosh, he needs to play some more football. AD Mitchell, though, also pretty impressive, honestly. Obviously, preseason, so hard to know how that'll translate, but it looked like they were kind of designing some stuff for him specifically. So I'm kind of excited to see his role in the offense this year.
All right. And for the Dolphins, no starters played. Rookie Malik Washington had 1 carry for 40 yards, leading in rushing. Jalen Wright, 7 carries, 36 yards, 6 targets, 4 catches for 41. Mike White, after the game was cut. So pick up Skylar Thompson if you have the roster spot. He's worth rostering because he's thrown to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle if Tua goes down. Jalen McMillan had a ridiculous catch, had just the one for 28 yards, but has had a solid preseason. Definitely worth keeping an eye on. Looks like he could be the wide receiver 3. Baker went 3 for 3 for 54. Rashad White had a rushing touchdown, 4 carries for 16 yards. So his normal average yards per carry from last year. Everything is status quo. Anything to comment on there, guys?
I think with Jalen Wright, it was very interesting to see him use that much in the passing game, particularly. I mean, 6 targets. That's really intriguing. If they have one of the running backs go down and he is being used in the passing game, he could be really valuable if either one of Achan or Mostert goes down in that case. But yeah, 6 targets. He caught 4 of them. I watched all of the targets actually, and 2 of them were just completely off target from Mike White. It wasn't even a deep pass, and it was nowhere near him. So I was pretty impressed by Jalen Wright.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much of note that happened in this one. It's kind of interesting that Baker and Rashad White played, but just a little preseason tune-up, I guess. McMillan's been looking good all preseason, but what will that role look like in the regular season? An exciting prospect, though. If it looks like he's out there for the 3 wide sets, McMillan's definitely someone to monitor. And I know JP's been high on him this whole process, but didn't look like that exciting of a game as far as fantasy. Let's go to the next one. 49ers Raiders. 49ers starters did play. Purdy had a decent day, except for the interception he threw. The interesting thing for the 49ers, at least, is it looked like Isaac Guerrero got back. So they had Mason Guerrero and Schrader all got some work. Mason went 8 for 42 and a touchdown. Guerrero 11 for 32, not great. Schrader 7 for 27. And that does not count Eli Mitchell, who did return to practice this week, but we're assuming he was held out of the game, probably most likely due to injury. Not really assuming he has the RB2 role there, but if he's healthy, he's probably the favorite still. Kind of a money backup to CMC there with all four of those guys. We'll probably get some more information on that on cutdown day. Jacob Cowing continues to have a great preseason, 3 for 39 and a touchdown. If they trade Ayuk, he's definitely a name to watch, especially with all the time Pearsall missed. As far as the Raiders go, no starters played. O'Connell didn't even play. Laube had 3 rushes for 12 yards, 1 catch for 6. Kind of the only fantasy relevant player even worth talking about, and that's not even that notable. Mostly 49er stuff here, but if you guys have any comments on either team, feel free to jump in.
Jordan Mason is interesting, a lot of speculation. We just have to see what happens, week 1 when everyone's healthy. Who is spelling CMC if CMC is actually healthy, that is, or who's starting if CMC is injured. But definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on. At this point, I don't think Mason or Mitchell are really available for free anywhere. I don't really want to pay for either of them. So just keep an eye on them. And if you have them, be happy, I guess.
Yep, that was the only thing I was really going to talk about was the running backs as well.
JP, next game we got.
We have the Rams versus the Texans, and we didn't see starters from either team in this game. There really isn't much notable action that happened at all. We had Cam Akers, though. He had a good game. He had 7 carries for 53 yards and 3 catches for 19 yards, and he had an incredibly impressive run. It was just crazy to see that after tearing both of his Achilles and coming back from both of them, that he still looks this good. Jawar Jordan, he was the guy also competing for a backup job here behind Joe Mixon. He went 4 for 12. He had a catch for 7 yards. It was fine. But Dameon Pierce, he seems like he might be the guy lagging behind both of these guys. And he might be a cut candidate. And then on the Rams side, there was really nothing at all that I really cared about. We saw Zach Evans and Boston Scott were the only players I even knew on the team that were playing. Both of them were inefficient, didn't look that great, but got a lot of volume. Then Boston Scott was cut.
David, tell us how you're falling for Cam Akers real quick.
Look, we all liked him at least at one point or another. The injuries have been brutal, really bad luck. Seems like enough time has happened that look, he's probably not going to be the same guy he was, but as a backup to an older running back, if he's Joe Mixon's backup, he's definitely worth rostering.
Have you or a loved one been personally victimized by Cam Akers?
I have.
Yes, I have. And I'm ready to be hurt again.
He's hurt me many times. Also, his Achilles hurt him as well.
All right, next game we're going to talk about Ravens versus Packers. All starters sat, so hard to get too much into it, but we're going to try anyways. So Lloyd and Dillon are the likely RB 2 and 3 when healthy, but both have had spotty health all preseason. Neither are locked to play one, so Emmanuel Wilson could potentially open the season as the RB2. Packers have a lot of young depth at wide receiver. If Bo Melton, Malik Heath, Grant Dubose do not make the team, any of those three, they definitely could wind up on a different 53. Melton would be the only one we would have immediate interest in, but all three are at least something to monitor, especially in a best ball league worth a roster spot. Devontae Walker seems to be buried down the depth chart as well on the Ravens side.
Nothing much to talk about here. I do think the Lloyd and Dillon injuries make Emmanuel Wilson an interesting add. I don't expect either of those injuries to be super long. Maybe Dillon gets kept on the roster and put on IR. Maybe Dillon gets cut. We know Lloyd's going to make the team based on his draft capital, but just something to see how it plays out over the next couple of days. And the receiver position is something I'm very interested in. I don't expect them to keep 7 receivers, even though all 7 have shown at least what I think and the beat writers for the Packers think that they should be on a 53 somewhere. I've seen what Bo Melton can do. So, like you just said, if he ends up on a different team that has a weaker depth chart at wide receiver, he's someone I'm probably going to add if he's available anywhere. DeBose and Heath, they're definitely depend on the spot if I'd be that interested, but they're good players, man.
Homer.
Maybe. But I know more about these players than the players on the 31 other teams.
You sure do. I ain't gonna argue with that. There's a reason I had you rewrite this section. David, what is our next game?
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the Panthers and the Bills. Deontay Johnson had 3 targets on 9 routes with Bryce Young. We like to see that. We expect to see that. Jordan Matthews, a little blast from the past there. He had 5 snaps to JT Sanders' 10, but he also came away with a touchdown. So not someone we're interested in rostering really, but could put a thorn in JT Sanders' side and make him not really usable this year. It seems like Thielen's probably the team's slot receiver, something we were kind of hoping for Xavier Legette to take over, but he may be able to do that by the end of the year. Bills held out Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. So that's probably what the running back room looks like for them. Nothing else that was very notable for the Bills that happened. Think you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I really like Ray Davis, honestly. He seems like he's probably locked into the RB2 job. And we saw Latavius Murray. Oh, I think he's the oldest running back in the entire league last year, and the Bills still gave him a lot of work in the red zone. So I think Ray Davis might have that role. And I don't know, I'm starting to get more and more excited about him. I've heard rave reviews all through training camp. In preseason, he's looked pretty good. If I can get him tacked into a trade as a throw-in, I'm pretty interested. And also in redraft as like a final pick, I might kind of toss him into my team on like a deeper kind of roster.
Still love Deontay. Also a little bit upset about Leggett. Have a decent exposure to him. Would love for him to play that power slot, but what can you really do about it? Next game, JP.
We have the Vikings versus the Eagles, and breaking news, as everybody already knows by now, but Jahan Dotson is now on the Eagles, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. David, you had an interesting thought. His value is clearly down on keep trade cut and the market, but it was at least interesting that you were talking about. Well, I mean, he's on a better offense instead of being the second option; he might be the third. I thought it was kind of interesting. Made me not feel quite as depressed about my Jahan Dotson shares.
I will say, like, I had him as a sell for the Commanders still, so it's not like I love Dotson. I think it was a neutral move for him personally, and it seems like a lot of people thought it was a negative.
After getting your perspective, I think it's probably a minor negative, maybe not as bad as it initially felt, but it's interesting. I mean, it does stink if you have him because being the third option with a running quarterback does stink, but he would have been the second option on a bad offense with a running quarterback before. Anyways, Paris Campbell, he now seems to be on the roster bubble post Dotson trade, and he played all 24 slot snaps with Pickett after being sat with the starters previously. He seems to be bumped down the totem pole, obviously, with Dotson's arrival. The RB3 seems to be up in the air for the Vikings. Kene Nwangwu is usually a special teamer, but Miles Gaskins ran ahead of Dwayne McBride. McBride was a rookie last year. He hasn't done anything. I think he's probably a cut candidate. We're interested in Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler, obviously, but if there is a third running back on this team and they're on waivers, we're at least interested on rostering whoever that is.
Yeah, and McBride didn't even make the team last year. He was on the practice squad most of the season, and so no other NFL teams really wanted him versus Gaskin got cut from the Dolphins and was picked up. So he's interesting to roster if you have extra roster spots, but I think I'd prefer to roster running backs on offenses I believe in more that are third string over him. But if it's all you can do, worth the speculative ad. Next game, Steelers versus Lions. Cordero Patterson had more rush attempts with the starters than Najee Harris did.
Arthur Smith, man.
Doing Arthur Smith things. I've I've been a victim of Arthur Smith for a
And the
couple years.
season's a wrap. Let's just stop. I don't even want to do this anymore.
Arthur Smith is going to be a pain in the ass all year long.
Yes, sir. And the Russ-led offense looked good for the first time this offseason. And although it is not named, it seems like he's earned the job. They're going to be coming out with it, I believe, sometime this week. Speculation is it's going to be him. Fields also looked okay, but it's just the Steeler thing to do is naming Russ the starter.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying all offseason. And going back to the Cordell Patterson thing, in all seriousness, I don't care that he had more rush attempts than Najee Harris in the third preseason game.
Yeah, if it's happening in the regular season, though, I'm going to start losing my crap.
Hopefully, it's because of Jalen Warren's injury, and that is it. I hope maybe he's playing the Jalen Warren role. That's the only rationale I could pray for with Arthur Smith here.
And David, what is our next game?
Yeah, we're going to talk Chargers Cowboys. So last week, Brandon Rice got the start over DJ Chark and Quentin Johnson. This week, Brandon Rice played while DJ Chark and Quentin Johnson sat with the starters. Just a real tough room to predict right now. So, I'm not going to really stand out on a limb for any one of these three. I don't think they have earned that. Rico, Dowdle, and Zeke sat, so they are the likely starters. Which order that is, I don't know. Who's going to have the most work? Hard to tell, but that's definitely worth monitoring. Freeman, Vaughn, Malik Davis seem to be fighting for one, maybe two roster spots, depending on how special teams plays out. But the third back there is probably going to have some value just because that room's so wide open. Trey Lance did what Trey Lance does, right? He had a horrible game from an NFL standpoint, 5 interceptions. I think he also had a fumble. Then he ran for like 100 yards and a touchdown, and I think had over 20 fantasy points if he did the math. So, if he ever gets a shot, he's still worth having. But he just needs to start. He just needs to play. He hasn't played much in his whole career.
Who's going to give him a start, man? The guy probably should just go to the Arena
I was
Football
gonna
League.
say, yeah, UFL or something.
He needs snaps.
Yeah, I've been adding Trey Lance as a guy that might have a shot next year because his contract is up after this season. I'm starting to get a little bit less bullish on that idea that somebody's going to give him a shot. I might still hold him if it's a deep roster, but I'm more open to dropping him at this point.
Yeah, you don't win many games with 5 interceptions, so I think a lot of NFL teams are pretty turned off by that. JP, what is our next game?
We have the Giants versus the Jets. Malachi Corley has had a decent preseason so far, as I mentioned earlier, but four other wide receivers were rested with Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Alan Lazard, and Xavier Gibson. Corley has not been getting on the field in two wide receiver sets with starters, as we mentioned in a previous episode. It's somebody to monitor, but not currently set up to produce. He might only be in the field in three wide receiver sets, and that might even just be only for later in the season, as it appears at right now. But Brees, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis, they all sat. So those seem to be the guys that are locked in as the three running backs on the roster. For the Giants, they sat their starters, which at running back included Devin Singletary, Eric Gray, and Tyrone Tracy. Another situation where it's probably those three.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in if Israel Abanikanda gets cut from the Jets. I know David asked me why earlier, and it's because he's a crush, okay? But realistically speaking, we probably know who is fantasy relevant off of these teams already. And it's pretty much everyone that sat, with the exception of Xavier Gibson and probably Alan Lazard.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much talked about everything important here. Corley's kind of interesting, but like you said, he's really probably not going to have a role to produce this year. Justin, you want to jump into the next game?
Absolutely. Browns and Seahawks. Browns only rested Watson, Cooper, Judy, and Njoku. Didn't rest any healthy running backs. Wide receiver 3, although probably irrelevant outside of best ball, seems to be between Elijah Moore and Tillman. Some people are speculating that Moore is going to be playing on the outside, although earlier in the offseason, people thought it'd be Tillman just because of his prototypical body type. Jerome Ford had some run. Could just be because Pierre Strong was out injured. Deontay Foreman, we talked about recently, was in the hospital after a neck injury. He's back playing. He played in this game. But because of the thin RB room, that could be why Ford was playing. He seems to still be in line to be the starter as long as Chubb is out. And Chubb update, still on the pup without a clear timetable for return. Ford seems a viable RB3 with upside when he's out. On the Seahawks side of things, Geno, JSN, Metcalf played one series, looked good. Metcalf had a touchdown. Metcalf will have touchdowns. Nothing too much to read into it. Would have been really interesting to see Lockett out there so we could get some insight into JSN versus Lockett on two wide receiver sets, but unfortunately didn't see that.
Well, I mean, maybe this is going to help JSN get off to a hotter start. I don't know. I know, David, you really like JSN, and I know, Justin, you don't.
I love Jason, man.
I don't dislike him. I just dislike David.
That's okay, man. Give me all your Jason. I'm excited to see him this year, whether he is in the two wide receiver sets or not. We expect new OC Ryan Grubb to run a lot more three wide than they have in the past. We also expect them to throw it more than they have in the past. So I think all three, Jason, Metcalf, and Lockett, have a pretty good shot at producing. Metcalf probably still the one, but JSN definitely could have a nice fantasy season. Not a whole lot notable from the Browns, though it is really nice to see Deonta Foreman back out there after that scary injury.
All right, David, start us off with a team you're not excited about talking about anybody on.
Well, hey, I like Olave. Is that the team you're considering?
Yeah, but he didn't play.
Oh, well, all right. Fair enough. All right, we're talking Titans Saints. Titans actually started most of their starters. Pollard 5 for 17 and one touchdown on the ground, 2 for 27 through the air. Spears 4 for 12 on the ground, 1 for 12 through the air. Still kind of hard to have a strong feeling on which player is going to have which role. I still think Pollard's going to have the majority of the work, but not a major majority personally. And Spears is still going to get some play. He's a pretty good player. As far as the Saints, they pretty much sat everyone that mattered.
Sure did. We did get to see a little bit of Spencer Radler, but throw into nobody. It's hard to read too much into someone playing with players that won't even be on an NFL team in a week, you know? So not too much we can read into that. We really wish we could have seen more of a distinct break. Obviously, Pollard had one more carry, one more catch, but on such a small sample size, who knows?
A.T. Perry, he had two catches for 67 yards. That's the only guy that I'm sort of interested in. I only really care about him if you're in a best ball league because he had some big games last year. And if he's the wide receiver 3, it's at least somebody to have on a roster in a best ball.
Don't hate that in a best ball league. Not really very interested in a lineup league, though. Quarterbacks there are just too bad.
Yeah, I'll take any wide receiver 3 probably in a best ball in most scenarios.
Any wide receiver 4 in a best ball league.
All right, the next game we have up is the Cardinals versus the Broncos. We saw that they sat 3 running backs, so it seems like they have those 3 locked in, and that's James Conner, Trey Benson, and Amari DeMarcado is the RB3 seemingly. And then they also sat the starters in the receiving game with Kyler, Marv, Michael Wilson, and Greg Dortch. That seems like it's going to be the top 3 wide receivers. Zach Pascal is also out. And we have Trey McBride and Elijah Higgins also with the starters. And Zay Jones, as we mentioned, he is suspended. I think this probably helps Michael Wilson a little bit. I don't know that I'm really counting on him in any format, but it might help him get off to a hot start.
Dortch.
And then, yeah, Justin, you've been talking about Dortch might be the guy there. I mean, is that something you actually are interested in rostering?
In best ball only. No, I don't care. I just think it's going to be muddy behind Marv and McBride.
Yeah, I think those 2 guys are gonna soak up a lot of targets. And then on the Broncos side, Javonte McLaughlin and Samaje Perine sat. Now, this might be that Perine is locked in, or it might just be that they've seen all that they need to see. It's still tough for me to see him making the team. We saw Aldrick Esme play today. I think that he's probably gonna be the RB3. Blake Watson, it seems like he's probably gonna be out of there. Maybe they roster 4 running backs, but it's probably just gonna be 3 with McLaughlin, Javonte, and estimate if I had to project at this moment. We saw Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Tim Patrick, they all sat, while Troy Franklin, he got some run. He had 1 reception for 21 yards, and he also got a carry for 9 yards. So the vibes have not been that good on Troy Franklin lately, and it seems like he's behind at least 4 wide receivers on the depth chart right now, maybe 5. But we also saw Bo Nix, Greg Dulcich, and Adam Troutman sat. Zach Wilson looked pretty good, but who cares?
I think the P9 thing is probably because they would owe him a lot of money if he got hurt still. Why risk that when you can cut him? Franklin, especially going all the way back to like February, March, April before the draft. Kind of sad to see where he's at right now, but he's still a young guy with some upside. I wouldn't give up on him entirely. Probably more of like a taxi squad player this year.
Disappointing for me. I like Troy Franklin going into the draft season, so tough to see. That was a rough combine, a rough fall since then, and I don't think there's too much more to say about the rest of that. Last game, Pats versus Commanders. We're not going to give you too much information because it's still going on as we're recording. We did see the shoulder injury, second most common injury in the NFL. Brains account for about 40% of the shoulder injuries in the NFL. It had not been diagnosed when we started recording. We are hopeful he doesn't miss any time. I know people aren't 100% sure that Drake May is ready to go from a ready to play in the NFL, but he looked pretty good. We saw him make some nice throws just in the limited time that, before we started recording that he was in there. A mild shoulder sprain usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to recover from. And again, like we said, Drake May had a good showing, and it looks like he might have to start week 1 out of the frying pan into the fire with him. He's going to be starting if Brissett is out.
Yeah, and I think in this situation, it's kind of hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Like if May's the starter, unless he just looks so unready by the time Brissett's healthy, you just kind of got to stick with May at that point, right? Don't you guys think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And also, the Patriots have a brutal schedule this year. The defenses that they face is really rough, especially the beginning of the season. So that's why, as a May believer, I have been hoping that he would sit for 5 or 6 weeks. But if he has to start, maybe it's not a bad thing because you get the experience on the field. But I kind of would rather see him sit a little bit.
A little trial by fire could help, could certainly hurt. We
May
know a
help,
lot of
may not.
Ha! Bada big. Well, with that dad joke that I can't possibly top, we're going to wrap up for the day. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dado Construction Podcast. We hope this was as helpful and entertaining for you as it was for us. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen and view. And from all of us here at the Dado Construction Podcast, until next time.